Hi, and welcome to the video for this week about AI in C#, but turned around in that instead of coding AI, it is more about how I use AI to code C#. And it's primarily about Codex, but I will get into that. Because coding via AI is, in my opinion, two different areas. There's vibe coding, and I see vibe coding as someone who asks to have some code, but never really look at the code. While I have another phrase called AI-assisted coding, where we code together, me and an AI. I review it, I tweak the code, and in general, almost every single thing I've made with AI has not been has been touched by me in some capacity before it actually went into production. If we look at my AI-assisted journey of code, because many people say, "Oh, just use Claude Code; it's the best," and so on. It sometimes sounds like they have just seen Claude Code, tried it, and not tried anything else. I have, in my opinion, tried quite a few things. Of course, it started out with ChatGPT, which is still really, really good at coding. But the main problem is, of course, it can't see the other code. So every time you want to do something, it will need to give a generic example, a generic answer, instead of working with the code. So that's where I started, like almost all of us. But as the tools came along, I tried Cursor, not long, to be honest, because it had terrible timeouts at the time I tried it, which might be unfair, but also the quality of the code that came out and the time it took to get there. Probably again because of the timeouts. I really didn't have any good experience and canceled my subscription for Cursor. Then a little later, I tried to force myself because everyone else was doing it, Cursor, Windsurf, and so on. And I tried to do it, and yes, it can be decent at times. But what I found was that it's not for me to do it that way, to have an AI directly in your IDE working together with you. I have never understood why people could have this ghost code where it suggests some data. It just breaks my flow. And GitHub, Copilot, Cursor, Windsurf, all of those, they break my flow even more because it's 1 second I'm doing a review, 1 second I'm coding myself, 1 second I'm just sitting there waiting and doing research. So the context switching, going back and forward, just let me feel unproductive. So while I had tried for quite a while to really force myself, I found that this was not for me. I have an article about that on LinkedIn, why that is the way it is, but more or less described here as well. But then came along Codex Cloud, and Codex is from OpenAI, and it's just a website. Let me find it up here. chatgpt.com/codex, and we can go in and go to a specific repo and just get a pull request. Copilot agent have it in the same manner, but this was actually kind of good. I got some good code quality, especially on small tasks, but it's a very annoying process to be setting up in a system here, and you needed to then pull down the pull request code or the branch and work from there. But that was what they offered at the time that I tried it for the first time, and began actually using it quite a lot for the smaller tasks that I had no time for, while bigger tasks it was totally unreasonable to use. But else it's a pretty okay system. You just give it a add a button on the main page that goes to google.com. And you just give it what repo you want it off, and you can actually get it to generate 5 versions at the same time and then pick the best one. But if you start it off, it will spin up an online environment and work with the data up there. So spin up a machine. You can set up various extra stuff for what kind of programs like .NET should be available and so on. And then you just have a chat loop where you talk with your agent. And then you get your pull request. You can get it, and we can see that in a little while. But that is what Codex Cloud is. So really, really good at the small things, but an annoying process, which I will show a little later on. But now we have kicked it off. And then I tried Claude Code. I have never really seen the light in Anthropic and why people think it's better. ChatGPT 4.1 was way better at following instructions than Claude Code, in my opinion. It might be just a dialect of how I ask AIs to do something that OpenAI just gets, while Anthropic don't. It is more religion than science at the moment. But Claude Code, I sat down. I put in $10 on Claude. I didn't want to go and get a subscription, and then I tried their tooling, and it's amazing. Claude Code is an amazing tool, and I really felt the buzz over the next 45 minutes trying to use it, only to find out that after 45 minutes and a coding task that was actually really good, I will talk about that in 1 second, it had cost me $5. $5 in the grand scheme of things is not much, but Claude Code you get as part of your OpenAI subscription. So if you have a subscription, you get it for free, nothing more. There's something similar with Claude Code, but you hit your limits more often, it seems. And it was at this point I actually made an article called Battle of the AIs, where I took these 7 different things: Claude Code, myself as a human coder, Codex Cloud, GitHub, Cursor, Windsurf, Google CLI, all the tools that are available at the moment, and gave them exactly the same task. Again, I have a LinkedIn article talking about this and rating it in various different areas that I will link to in the descriptions. But the main part here was that what I had just experienced with Claude Code, which was on the same day, this was in the morning, this was in the afternoon, I found out that while Claude Code was good, it spent 3 times as much time on it. I could spend less time making it myself. The code, exactly same code. I made it, threw it away for every 7 of these. And Codex did what Claude Code could in 45 minutes in 14 minutes. And it did it better. The code was simply better, in my opinion. And the problem here, of course, is its opinions, all of this. But so it only really confirmed my suspicion so far that while this was a really, really cool tool, this gives the best quality of code, despite it having an annoying process. And I lived with that until a couple of weeks ago, where they finally launched the Codex CLI and IDE, which is just the same quality as Codex Cloud, but with the same nature of Claude Code. I won't call it the same tool, because the tooling is so much better at Claude Code. It is very rough, especially on Windows, the new CLI, because it's a brand new tool. They're only in version 0.3 right now. But end of the day, if you can give it a task and it spits out good code, it will still be infinitely better than however good a tool you have in your toolbox. So right now, I have thrown away Cursor, I've thrown away GitHub, I've thrown away Codex Cloud. I don't really use it anymore. I've thrown away Claude Code because it's simply too expensive compared to what you get. And all my AI coding happens through Codex, primarily the IDE, which I will talk about, but the CLI is also there. So let's switch to a demo of Claude CLI and IDE. We can just quickly have a look how far this has come along. It has actually made the code, and we can see that it put in a button. It looked at the style, and that's one of the good advantages about Codex. It's really good at looking at the existing code and mimicking your style. Claude Code, when I tried that, it was more, I really needed to instruct it to tell, do it like this, do it like that. It wasn't good at understanding things like that. But here it mimics really good. I could now create a pull request and put it in, or draw it down, which I would normally do, test it out, tweak it, and so on. But in this case, which is a little task, I would probably let it go live if need be. In this case, I'm just going to archive it because I don't need it. And then I want to show you the CLI. So if we go into a command prompt, the way you install it is fairly simple, npm, and then install /g for global, and then add OpenAI /codex. When we do that, we get it installed, and we can go in and run Codex, which is just a tool. We can say hi to it and begin to go to a folder where we have some code and actually let it work with that code. In my case right now, I have the model set up to be ChatGPT 5 high, so that's the reason why it's so slow to even say hi back. But my main driver today is within Visual Studio Code. Let me actually switch to the right machine I have this Visual Studio Code in. There we go. So here I have my Visual Studio Code, and the main reason I am not in Visual Studio is there's no good integration into Visual Studio. You can actually go in and make a small tweak to the PowerShell script here and make it go and let's try to do it here. We can simply go in and say we want a new command line. So let's go in and change this developer prompt. Let's edit it to be called Codex. And instead of this extra, we can just write Codex. And if we do that and go here, we can actually have Codex run inside Visual Studio. But there's some shortcuts that don't work and stuff, so I don't really care to do that. So what I do is I just have my code, I have my Git changes, but everything is being run in Visual Studio Code instead. That just open up the same folder with the code, and I begin to ask it questions. So Codex as a CLI is just an extension like any other in the system. And right now it's very rough, so you need to essentially give it full access to your machine before it can run efficiently on its own. So if you run in this normal mode, it will actually ask you a lot of times on doing things. That's mostly a bug, and again why it's rough around the edges. But if you're okay with full access, you can actually do a lot of things. And then one very important thing is, of course, to have AI rules. We haven't talked about AI rules so far, but in the videos where we make our own coding, we of course make instruction files or system prompts and so on. And AI rules is essentially just a system prompt you give to an agent. And in Codex scenario, you need to write agents MD in order to make one. And this is my real life one. You can make multiple if you want to, but this is the one I have, 127 lines, where I talk about what this project is, how it should build the code, what the details are, that it's .NET 9, so it never begins. You might have tested AI and it suddenly began to say, oh, .NET 8 is the latest version, because it doesn't know. At the time of the cutoff date of ChatGPT 5, .NET 9 was not released yet. But giving it things like this, giving it how the solution is structured, giving it some rules on how I want to code, that it should follow my editor config, that it should not use NuGet packages that are not MIT, that it should do various different things, and how it should do Blazor work, how it should do Entity Framework work, and so on. And some coding styles that I always wanted to write new and then the object instead of var and stuff like that. So you need to find your own rules. You can actually, in the CLI, ask it for an init, and then it will actually look at all your code and make an agents file, so you don't need to start from scratch. I did that, took some of it, wrote some of it myself, and so on. And in that way, we can do exactly as we did in the cloud version, and get some code back. And once I get my code back, I just go in, see the git changes, run the code, because it's a local branch of the code, instead of needing to have that extra cumbersome step at getting a new branch down from GitHub. So for small tasks, that is what I do. I tell it, hey, this doesn't look right, or I need an extra column in this particular thing, and so on, and it just goes out and do it. It reads the needed code it needs to, and it goes in and do all the things it can do, back end, front end, and so on, because it is a really, really capable programming partner. But what I have seen is when we go to bigger stuff, it will totally break down in that it will not be able to do more advanced stuff. And for that reason, I put in some instructions here called planning mode, that when I tell the agent, and right now I will just put it in low so we don't need to wait a long time. Normally I will always work high, but low reasoning mode, just so we get a quick answer. And I will kick this off. And again, this runs locally. But what it essentially is being instructed is that it shouldn't begin to code. It should instead make a new file in the implementation plan folder that I have on my machine, and it should use it based on this this template I have. And the template is just that it needs to make a step-by-step instructions on how it should the feature should work. And because of that, it goes from, in this case, we're just adding a newsletter, and we need to store the subscription in a database. It will transform that into actually being a much bigger thing. And we can see down here, it's now thinking about doing it and so on. And hopefully it will pick it up. Again, I'm normally in high mode, but if we look at it here, it will work its way, and it has now made a new MD file in my implementation plans. Here I have a previous one it made that actually, where it without such a plan it failed, but with such a plan it succeeded. And what we can see is it has already made a step-by-step plan on what is the feature, how we should do it. Okay, it needs to have a new newsletter subscription model, and it should have these and these fields and so on. And it gave back a long list. And I have also instructed it to say once it's done, give me back some questions that it might have. For example, where should the subscribe form be? What should be collected? Do we need consent? And all these kinds of things, which I can then go in and say, one, at the top, two, it only needs a first name and a last name, consent, here's the text I want you to use, and so on and so forward. No, we don't need an export feature, and so on and so forward. And once we do that, it will update this plan it made based on the questions. I can ask if there's any further questions, but again, I have instructed it to say, okay, don't begin to code anything unless I say the word start implementation. And once I say start implementation, it will begin to code, but now it's coding not based on only what I've written here and hope for the best. It's actually based on this entire thing that, of course, I need to read through and say, no, I don't want it to do this, but I want this to do this, and so on. So that is how I code. And again, with this step in the planning phase, or the spec requirements, or there's very many different names for this, it is possible to get an even better experience with AI on top of Codex, in my opinion, being the best one in the first place. So if you have a ChatGPT subscription, you should definitely go and get yourself a test of this and see if it's the right for you. But with that was everything I had this time around. Hopefully we go back to some coding quite soon, but we are still awaiting the new agent framework from Microsoft, and that's the stalling of new videos at the moment. But hopefully we get there soon, and we will go back to actually, instead of just coding using AI, to actually code some AI. So see you in the next one.